Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last panel of the day. For those of you who don't know me by now, my name is Marissa True. I am the host of Tez Talks Radio and the head of content for TZ APAC. And for our final panel, we've brought together 3 platform builders who are seeking to empower individuals in a Web3 world. So it's my pleasure to introduce Rédouane Ramdani, who's the CEO and co-founder of Snipfeed. And online joining us is Lisa Lambert, head of learning at Disco, and Shannon Wells, head of community and governance at Livepeer. So hi to you online as well.
Hi, it's wonderful to be here.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so to get started, I think we need to get a background on each of your respective platforms. So Rédouane, we'll start with you. Can you tell us about Snipfeed, what it is, and what it's intending to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So Snipfeed, in a few words, is basically building the Shopify for content creators. We focus on digital goods and experiences. So basically, you can build everything from your website to anything you will sell, from live streams, exclusive content, classes, etc. So instead of having to go through a platform, you build it all on your own and on your own terms. And we also make sure that every single creator gets all the data on their customers, from email, like phone number, and can really build and thrive kind of independently.
Excellent. And Shannon, can you please tell us a bit more about Livepeer?
Absolutely. Livepeer is Web3's video infrastructure layer. We are a decentralized open source video transcoding network built on the Ethereum blockchain. We're a proof of stake protocol, and we leverage blockchain to drastically reduce the cost of video transcoding and content delivery, which are the 2 most expensive and complicated parts of doing anything related to video on the internet, which makes up almost 90% of the traffic on the internet. So when we can kind of disrupt the underlying technology of doing video on the internet, we can drastically reduce the cost and increase the options available to creators in terms of the platforms that they can be creating and using.
Fantastic. And Candice, can you tell us a bit more about Disco?
Yeah, I'm filling in for Candice today. Unfortunately, she's not feeling well, so I'm here on her behalf. But at Disco, we're building a platform, an all-in-one platform, to help creators pioneer the future of virtual live learning. Right now, a lot of the tools they have to take together are trying to kind of digitally duct tape and super glue a bunch of different tools together. So we're looking to bring an all-in-one mission control to creators where they own their brand, their revenue, and their learners as well, and have everything that they need to build and scale their live learning empires.
So I'm aware that Disco actually just raised a fresh round of 15 million in funding. Can you tell us what that's going to be used for?
Yeah, it's some pretty exciting times at Disco, and it's pretty amazing to see just how far we've come in the last year, and then just looking ahead to what's to come. So I think the first thing with that is we have an incredible team. I'm so proud of the people that I get to work with, and so excited to get to work with them every day. We're going to be growing our team, and we're a remote first company, so it's a really great opportunity to look at a diverse, incredible team that we're able to bring together. And a big part of that too is we're going to be building out some must-have features. We've been in closed beta with our customers for the last little bit. That's now open, and we've been collaborating with them and trying to learn what features, what tools do they really need. Some of them are going to be around Web3 tooling, which are really excited to help them build out their communities. Some more around built-in marketing features, some more engagement tools as well, course automation, a whole bunch more coming with that. And then we have our own learning community. It only feels right. So we're going to be scaling out our own learning community to help creators build out theirs. A little bit meta on that side, but we've got some really exciting programming and opportunities for that coming up. And lastly, just as we have the platform to help creators build and scale their live learning experience, we also partner with some incredible creators to offer our own transformative live learning experiences. And these are creators like Margaret Atwood, the cultural icon and queen of dystopia, author of Handmaid's Tale and many other books. And we've got another program we run is with Roger Martin, who's one of the top management thinkers in the world. So we're going to be building out our partnerships with different creators to be offering more experiences like that.
Fantastic. So what each of your businesses have in common is this approach towards a Web3 world and trying to make sure that your businesses have this sort of technology integrated within it. And Rédouane, I mean, I'm aware that you're looking at integrating blockchain into Snipfeed. So first of all, how is that going? And why do you actually feel that blockchain is a fundamental part of, future business infrastructure?
Yeah, I think especially for creators, it's going to be really, really tremendous, because for the first time, they're going to have the opportunity to create a win-win ecosystem between, like their fans and the creators. We're talking about that earlier, but typically when you are a fan right now on a platform like Patreon, there is no difference between being the first supporter and being the the first million kind of like supporter. The idea here is really being able to create the right incentives as well for for the community. So typically that's what blockchain also enables. You can say, okay, in the community, like these kind of behaviors are going to be rewarded, for instance, with tokens, or like with certain NFTs, that the creators can actually mint. And I feel that's really going to be that's going to be super interesting to see how creators are going to leverage all those tools. I feel so far creators haven't necessarily been, as haven't like launched as many community, oriented NFTs as we could have like expected, while they have the most engaged community most of the time, right? So typically I feel like what's going to happen in the next 5 years is being able to have the right utilities associated with the NFTs are really what's going to change somehow the whole ecosystem for content creators. And then I just think that's naturally over time. The other thing, that's gonna enable creators to have more independence is Web3, and the blockchain in general, because right now they're all depend on platforms. They depend on Facebook or like Twitter, or like YouTube. But how do you build really true independency? It's really through, I think, Web3. Even if, for instance, at Snipfeed right now, when you have customers, you have their emails, you have their phone numbers, you really you can create mailing lists, etc. But somehow still, you're still dependent on maybe MailChimp or like something like that. I think in the future, the Web3 kind of options that are going to be available for creators are really going to be able to offer them through independence from platforms, and it's just going to be them and their community pretty much. So that's really I think exciting for the whole ecosystem, and that's why for us, we are going to start with NFTs, and then we think that the future is really around social tokens for creators. So that's really what's on our roadmap right now.
So it's basically using blockchain technology to make sure that the creators actually own the relationship with their communities.
Exactly.
Via a platform like Snipfeed that will hopefully enable that to exist.
Exactly. And like creators, of course, like we want to offer that to them, but if they someday want to change platforms, like they can do it. And that's, somehow I think it's a risk for a platform. That's why a lot of platforms don't want to do it. But we think that's really what's going to bring value to creators over time. And that's why we really want to be early on, right. On that, yeah.
Yeah, so creating a symbiotic relationship with the platform and the creators that are actually using that platform.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And Shannon, so what does it actually mean to be like a decentralized video streaming network?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll answer that question thinking about the difference between Web 2 and Web 3 and kind of what's different for video creators and video platforms in the new Web 3 context. I think the two really big game changers that Livepeer is really excited about are one, and Rédouane kind of referred to this as, in Web 3, creators own their content. When you upload content onto a platform, even after you've minted a video NFT, that's owned by the creator. So that's already game changing. And the other big game changer that I mentioned in terms of what blockchain and Web3 enable for video technology is just drastically reducing the cost of doing these very complicated, technical processing pieces of video transcoding. And, the reason why, platforms like YouTube have to rely on business models that capture and monetize users' data is because that underlying infrastructure is just really expensive to operate. YouTube was running at a loss, and had to be acquired by Google just because, it couldn't get the revenue it needed to be able to maintain that kind of infrastructure. But, a lot of platforms today still have challenges generating enough revenue to cover those infrastructure costs. So blockchain and, decentralized video transcoding, Livepeer has over 100 active nodes around the world. And, these are node operators providing GPU capacity on at-home computers. Any computer that has a GPU card in it can be used towards running a node similar to the Tezos blockchain as well. You have lots of different nodes around the world, and you're able to decentralize providing that really, intensive compute capacity. So that's what's really transformative. And, when you can have a lower cost solution for doing video transcoding, what we hope at Livepeer that's going to enable and what we want to be part of is just way more platforms that creators can choose from, because there's only a few big monopolies right now. And what Livepeer wants to be is the infrastructure layer for, we hope, many more diverse platforms that are more tailored to lots of different creator types and interests and communities.
I think it's so interesting that people tend to neglect, on the consumer front of things, you neglect the technological complexity of what's actually happening on the infrastructure layer and how that impacts which platforms actually dominate the space and where we interact the most. So approaching that from a decentralized strategy is a refreshing idea. But then on the consumer end of things, does anything necessarily change? Will we consume live streaming in a different way?
That's a really good question. And I think to get to mainstream adoption of Web3, I think a lot of the, builders need to be careful and not, increase barriers to entry by making it feel too complicated, or I can't. Solving the onboarding and the login problem for Web3, I think that still is a big challenge in this space, getting the user experience right for that. And hopefully what will happen is the builders who do want to create these platforms and the creators who are looking for their new platforms have a strong connection with their audience. So you already know you don't need to reach 1 billion people, to have a successful platform. You can have, 100,000, 1 million members on your platform and have a sustainable business with a more reasonable size audience. And that's part of the challenge, right? It's when you're trying to appeal to global mass audiences, you develop like really shallow communities. And, we hope with, again, more platforms, you can have deeper engagement with smaller communities.
So then across all three companies, these are all technologies that essentially support content creators to different capacities. So it's across education, it's social media, it's video content. So then for the creators themselves, what are the needs that they have that are not being served by a Web 2 world? And the other side of that question is, what new needs will the Web 3 world generate that will need to also be addressed? That's a question that's addressed to all of you. So Rédouane, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, for sure. I think Web3, the first thing that's really gonna help content creators with is, as we were saying right before, is really being independent from platforms. I think right now, what we don't really realize is that a lot of creators think that platforms are at war with them almost. That's really something that comes back a lot from creators. Even, so I'm talking about, of course, social platforms, but also even payment platforms. So for instance, at Snipfeed, we have a lot of, spiritual creators, astrologers, things like that. And for instance, Stripe isn't as easy for them, as it might be for other creators. So being able to have other options to pay for payouts, to be able to have transactions going on with their fans, I think is going to be super interesting. And I took this example, but we can think of also about a platform like OnlyFans, for instance, right? So OnlyFans decided at some point not to allow kind of sexual content,
explicit content,
exactly,
yes.
Explicit content, and everybody knows that's pretty much
everything on OnlyFans is explicit content.
Exactly. So typically, from overnight, a lot of creators realized that they could literally lose their revenue stream, their main revenues. And so typically the problem was coming from OnlyFans, saying banks wouldn't allow them to operate because of the nature of this content. But now imagine if to actually subscribe to someone on OnlyFans, you could buy a coin and then spend this coin, on the platform. That will totally change the game, and I think create way more freedom for content creators. So that's, I would say the first element. And then the second element, what's really important for creators is really having the right incentives for their fans. And I think being able to say, hey, I just released an album, making sure that people are going to stream the album, for instance, right now. So let's say if you are like Billie Eilish and you just kind of started, You'll be, oh, like I'm on YouTube, or you can go like stream it. You have a maybe you're posting a story. If someone really like you, they're gonna listen to the music. But a lot of people, they're just gonna forget about it. But now imagine that in exchange for like watching or streaming, whatever new song she's releasing, you're gonna actually earn maybe like a token or like an NFT or something like that. Then all of a sudden she's gonna have way more engagement and kind of like real engagement coming from her fans. And I think that's really what's gonna change in the future. Is creators are looking for two things mostly. They're looking for engagement, and they're looking also for like monetization. So I think Web3 is basically gonna change those two things really drastically by creating the right incentives for fans and for creators as well on the long run. So yeah, I think that's pretty much what's super, super exciting about the space right now.
So then when we pivot that from the creator space and more into the education space, for a platform like Disco, what role of decentralized technology would help the education space? Like what kind of fundamental part of it or qualities of it are integral to the future of education?
I think there's a few of them right now, and I think it's a super interesting time for education because education itself is being so disrupted. We saw massive shifts to education over the course of the pandemic. And even if you just look at higher education, people who had to shift really quickly to learning remote during this time really quickly started to question the value proposition of what they were paying for with that experience. And we're seeing this rise of creators creating these incredible learning experiences, and learners wanting to learn from creators they trust and that they love in community and in a really engaging way. And there's some limitations right now with this around Web 2. Some of it is having to work with these intermediaries around ownership for it, but it's also makes it challenging for creators not only to build a learning experience for their communities, but building it for and with their learners and doing it in a way where they're incentivizing their learners to help one another learn as well. So you can think of some kind of token economy around giving peer feedback, where those kind of behaviors, those kind of community behaviors are incentivized as well. And then if you think about it from a learner experience, there's a lot of people who are doing kind of their own personal degree journeys, but there's no acknowledgement of what these are. If you think of one of the biggest value adds coming out of a university or a college, it's that certificate of authenticity, it's your diploma. So right now people are looking to acquire these different skills, but there's no way to validate that they have these skills. And this is something that Web3 can help enable in a really interesting way, where people can own their own personal learning journey record and be able to really quickly share that, whether it's with employers, whether it's with other institutions. So it's really kind of a twofold thing that Web3 can unlock, both for creators and for learners all around the world.
Okay, so we're almost looking at a immutable report card of some description as well, so that academic qualifications take on a whole new nature. Because I mean, let's be honest, like how many of us actually even have our printed degrees anywhere? So there's no real technical proof that we went to school. And at the same time, I like the notion of a token economy that would incentivize greater learning within this kind of supported learning digital environment. But then how far along is Disco in terms of integrating this kind of technology? Or is it just in an exploratory phase?
We're experimenting with some things right now with, for example, I mentioned we're working with Roger Martin. We just finished a cohort with his, and we'll be issuing NFT certificates coming out of that, which is pretty exciting. And we're working really with some of our creators to be bringing some of these things to life. We're partnering with Tezos actually on a learning experience with Margaret Atwood that's happening in September. And that's really a collaborative learning experience. So with that partnership, people who are part of that learning experience are going to have a record to take with them. That's not just an NFT certificate, but it's actually part of what they co-created together in that space. So we're starting to experiment. The fun thing I think about this space is that there's so many ideas that come from community, and that's part two where we're moving towards actually launching a learning community around Web3, crypto, and blockchain as well, so that we can have this conversation with creators and really build again for and with them.
Yeah, I was just kind of like following up on that. I think it's also can create a dialogue for the first time between the the teacher and the student somehow. Because if you can imagine that the students are like a DAO, for instance, the curriculum can like evolve with time. I think a lot of people are frustrated right now, like when they're in college, because like, okay, this class made sense 20 years ago. It doesn't make sense, anymore right now. So of course you have to have some like boundaries and like find the right way to do so. But I feel like actually to have feedback from like a DAO, or like, let's say if you graduate from from a class, you have the NFT, and the NFT gives you like the power to actually vote for the next what the next curriculum is going to be like. I think that really creates a great feedback loop for educators. So yeah, I feel like what you guys are doing is definitely super interesting.
Yeah, so essentially developing a ever-evolving educational system. Because you're right. I mean, how many textbooks have been outdated, and we're buying textbooks that are registered with published in 2006 and are no longer as relevant today. So being able to offer students the ability to craft their own curriculum is very much a novel idea, and one that should be experimented with.
Can I share something that I think is kind of funny about this, is that it's not so novel. History tends to rhyme in this. If you go back to just after 1000, the year 1000, the turn of the millennia, the University of Bologna was one of the first institutions to start, and it really was started as a guild of learners. It was the learners who were in charge, and they were able to hire the lecturers for this. And depending how the lecturers did, how the learners voted on their performance, they kept them enrolled, and they were able to shape their learning journey. And that's something where we've seen, that's actually where the word university came from, was from that guild of learners. So this going back over 1,000 years ago, we're seeing it surface again, but technology is enabling what the new possibilities are for it.
I love that essentially this technology is basically able to resurface old ideas that maybe weren't as successful because we didn't have the means to develop them with the kind of technology that we have available today. Over at Livepeer, again, we were talking about infrastructure technology, and therefore not something that the user themselves directly interacts with, but in terms of how this is going to help solve the needs of the creators in a Web 2 versus what their new needs might be in a Web 3 world. What does that look like from a video streaming tech?
Yeah, from a video creator perspective, it looks like being able to mint and own your own video NFTs, and being able to, own that content and take it to any platform that you like. And, that's what's really exciting. It's the creator ends up controlling who has access to that content rather than the platform itself. So that's one really big one. And then the second is related to, token gated access, or, selectively being able to choose who's able to watch your content, tiered memberships for your community. I mean, those are all functions that you can also build into experiencing video on the internet, where you can decide when you want to share your content with who, and using social tokens to get the community and your audience involved in making decisions around experiences relating to your content.
So a lot of the discussions around Web3, NFTs, blockchain technology, I mean, many of the conversations that I've moderated at this event have always touched on the power of the creator. But one question that we need to address when we take a step even further back is why the creator is such a fundamental part of this Web3 future. Why do we have a very specific and laser focus on empowering them over anything else? Rédouane?
I think it's just generally like we're in a movement right now. We are in a post-industrial kind of era. And I think just going back to what you were saying, which was super interesting about like the gals, I think we are going back in time somehow at the village scale, where you actually you have a bunch of people on social, and that's why I think it's all starts somehow on social. Social is the new Main Street. That's where you hang out with your friends, especially for Gen Zs. And on social, you're gonna have a bunch of people that you trust because you trust their content. You kind of almost know them personally because if you watch someone's stories every day, you're almost gonna have this personal relationship, right? So all those different kind of creators on there, they actually gonna have a bunch of followers, not necessarily millions of them. You can have 10,000 kind of or 1,000 true fans. And if you I guess you're familiar with this theory. And those 1,000 true fans actually are gonna be the ones who are gonna empower you to make a living, totally independently. And that's kind of going back to this Main Street, allegory. It's basically you're going back and you're walking in this village, and every single you maybe your therapist there that you kind of like found on TikTok. Maybe you have, you know, like someone, and you kind of like just go.
Just a quick pause. Finding your therapist on TikTok is also a very new generation thing.
Yeah, I mean, like that's kind of a lot of people, you know, like they find so much like advice and stuff actually on TikTok, right? But you trust them because you've seen like so many of, you know, maybe Duo like on the platform, etc. And basically what's the difference, I think, between maybe even 5 years ago and right now is that right now everybody's a creator pretty much. And so all those different people that you maybe you cross path with on TikTok maybe has, you know, 15K followers, and you're gonna transact with this creator. And Web3 really kind of, you know, creates something really special for those small creators by really enabling them to create the right, you know, almost economics. And that's why I think creators are so important, because I think like this is almost a new era where it's basically the new labor somehow, which is kind of like a free labor is happening on right now is happening for free on social, and that's, you know, we're into this translation toward and a right somehow you know, system that's going to happen over time.
So then over at Disco, for example, the content creators we speak of are the educators themselves in a way. So how do we make sure that they are empowered in this space as much as possible, or at least very receptive to educating people within this arena?
I think it's an interesting space because I think education in particular, because I think of learning as what really takes us to new places. We're all having this conversation today because we're all curious and open to learning and seeing what new possibilities for technology could be. And I think of, there's a quote from Malcolm X that just kind of resonates with me every day. And just to paraphrase, is that education is the passport to the future. And if I think about what creators are doing right now, or what Web3 enables for creators, moving away from traditional institutions that really were the passport issuers, it's now creators that get to be the passport issuers. And with Web3, they actually get to be, you know, valid passports that can unlock new possibilities for learners, for communities that we haven't even yet imagined yet. And I think with creators, knowledge creators in this space, what they're really doing is they're enlisting co-creators. They're building up other pathways, new pathways for people to engage with Web3, engage for this new technology that maybe they don't want to lead it. Maybe they don't want to be in there building something for themselves, but they can be a contributor in a space where they're also enjoying the upside that comes from that. And they're incentivized to really be part of something more than just as an audience, but as a peer and a partner to creators.
And then at Livepeer, for example, when we talk about content creators, especially in a live streaming video sense, I mean, I think people's minds tend to go towards gaming streamers and just generally, you know, young children who are doing toy reviews. Why are they such a fundamental part of this Web3 future, and why do we need to make sure they have all of the tools available to them?
Yeah, I think it's such an important question. Why are creators fundamental to Web3? And it's because if you look at Web 2 and the deal creators have been getting in Web 2, it's not a very good one. For every dollar of content, for every dollar of profit on YouTube, you know, that comes from content, 55% goes to YouTube. That's like a really high take rate based on the value that a creator, you know, is delivering on a platform. So that's why the creator economy is kind of the essence of Web3. It's, you know, you get to unlock and capture for yourself and for your community, most importantly, you know, the value from what you put out there in the world. And Livepeer, you know, absolutely wants to be part of enabling that. And, you know, it's why we're excited to be connecting with the future builders, the Rédouanes and the Snipfeeds and, you know, all the other amazing platforms that are coming online right now.
So then, in that regard, are we actually looking at a world where this Web3 world is a world designed for creators, or are they just one part of the puzzle? Who else is involved in this puzzle?
I think, as we were saying, for the first time, the fans as well are, I mean, like fans, I'm using fans, but it can be, you know,
sure.
It's just a generic word. But typically, for the first time, the user is part of the game. So if you were using YouTube as an example, when you watch YouTube, you're not rewarded for watching YouTube. So for instance, you can use there's a company called Pools. What they're doing is super interesting. So they are working with a lot of content creators, artists, And when you're watching a YouTube video, you actually earn coins, social tokens from the creator. So that's really, really, to me, fundamental and that's the same thing in play to earn games, right? Usually, when there is no big difference somehow in the game in Web2 and Web3. Like they're kind of like similar. It's Age of Empires, like games like that. But when you played Age of Empire, well, you just spent time and money on the game. But the time that you spent wasn't considered. Now I think we are in a world, kind of almost a post-currency world, where attention is the real, like the real currency. So your attention has value, and I think what Web3 enables is actually, if you are a creator of game, a creator of music, whatever, if you create like great stuff and people enjoy your stuff, you can and people are going to believe in your game, or believe that it's going to grow over time. So they're going to spend more time on you, because somehow everything is still, I think as human beings, everything is still an investment somehow at a certain level. So people are like, I love it, but I'm investing as well in this creator. And I think that's really, so everybody, compared to the first internet, the Web 2, sorry. In the Web 2, basically the winners were the platforms, because you creators work for them, users work for them. They give their data. And now, for the first time, it's not the platforms. We kind of, it's the middle, because platforms were saying initially, oh, there are no more middlemen. The TV, like the studios, we basically destroyed all of that, but they replaced them in a way with the algorithms, etc. And I think that now, for the first time, there won't be no like middleman. They're going to be enablers, and I think Snipfeed in the future want to be an enabler. We want to give easy tools, etc. to creators, but we don't want to interfere in their relationship with their audiences. So I think that's like the biggest almost shift in the internet.
So then, if we're looking at Disco and Livepeer as well, what are your thoughts on how much emphasis there are on the creator, and then who else is in this mix that we really need to consider? Shannon, should we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Rédouane touched on it. It's the fans and the audiences are, co-creators in a lot of this. And that's the exciting thing I'm seeing right now is, creators who want to involve their fans and their audiences and being part of experiences, and again, like capturing that value and sharing that value together. And that's, the principle of DAOs, and why social tokens, are so powerful in this space, is because the creator, or, the star, recognizes that the fan is bringing as much value to the experience of being part of that community. And, that's the new economy that we're seeing. That's so exciting.
I think a lot related to what Shannon, what Rédouane are saying. I think what we're seeing too is from creators right now, so much emphasis has been around content, and Web2 has enabled a lot of content creation, content distribution. What Web3 are starting to enable is context creation and context co-creation, not just for creators, but for creators with their communities in new ways, and in ways that are providing value on all sides of this. So I think we're just starting to see the stages, or the early seeds of what this can grow into.
So then realistically, how far off do each of you feel we are from actually achieving a future like this? We're obviously all experimenting and developing it now, but what sort of timelines do you realistically have in mind?
So for us, we're hopefully going to launch something in the summer that's going to be large scale with some pretty good creators. We're going to announce some names hopefully pretty soon. But I think in general, the way companies like Web2 companies are going to be super important in the mass adoption of Web3 and crypto in general. The reason being, a lot of crypto companies that we've seen, the problem is that they want to launch immediately without having nailed the user experience. And I think in Web2 you have to nail the user experience, because otherwise nobody's using your product, and you're judged by investors, by users, by is the product working? Because if you check some project, maybe even if they don't have any users, they have a lot of enthusiasm, so they actually raise a lot of money, etc. And I think typically the way Web2 companies can really have an impact is adding crypto in an experience that is already live. So typically, if someone transacts, buy a class, or they're already doing that. So you're just making the experience better, and you also know what, for instance, what the users are expecting when they're paying for something. Do they expect to have a wallet that's not connected, and they need to connect that and have this extra step? Do they want to pay with credit card immediately? How do they want to have their NFT displayed, etc.? I think all of those data are data that we somehow have already because we have interacted with so many, hundreds of thousands of customers and creators, that this information is pretty crucial for, I think, the ecosystem in general. So yeah, I think it's a matter of like month for a lot of companies.
So basically, we actually have enough information to make real headway, at least as it relates to Snipfeed and what Snipfeed is trying to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, like, hopefully. We haven't launched yet, so I'm
TBD,
like,
TBD.
yeah, the Web3 part yet.
And then what about at Disco? How far off do you feel we are from blockchain integration in this education platform?
I think we're starting to see it incrementally already and in different places too, which is pretty exciting with it. I mean, like I mentioned, we're issuing NFT certificates now as a starting place and building out some other tooling for creators to look at. And I think there's actually a lot of value in introducing incrementally as well. Shannon mentioned some of the onboarding challenges in bringing people into this space as well. So by bringing it in incrementally and interfacing with some of the Web2 tooling that's out there, I think it's a bit more inviting and welcoming for people to be part of this, especially for something like learning, which is so integral to each and every one of us. But I hate making predictions on these sort of things because we're just coming from a time where we saw what typically happens in decades happen in a matter of weeks. And I think there's still a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of interesting things happening right now and a lot of momentum. So I want to make promises with things, but I'm very excited about a lot of the experiments that are happening right now and the potential for things to come out of that, especially with all the collaboration that's behind this.
Right. So essentially, it's the exponential rate of growth that makes it too difficult to pin down a prediction, because as we have one estimate, which is a few months, at the same time, we don't know what's going to be possible within a year or even 2 years. And then Shannon, what about you? What's your ballpark estimate?
Ooh, on a timeline, I think this year will be the year that we will see a breakout application in the Web3 space capture a significant share of the existing Web3 audience, which has grown a lot, over the last year. I think to get to mass adoption outside of the new Web3 curious, Web3 experimental crowd, Rédouane's absolutely right. The user journey and user experience just has to be so much smoother. And TBD, whether, that will be a Web2 company that does the legwork now to figure out what it needs to do to integrate Web3 to, into an existing user experience. But I think it'll be really interesting because, I'm in this space full time. I often forget that I'm in a bubble and we're just such a small portion of the overall population that, has a long way to go. My mom still has challenges taking screenshots on her phone. There is a huge, massive kind of user challenges to get everyone into Web3. So yeah, I'm hesitant to say anytime soon for a Web3 native company to reach mass, billion users.
Yeah, it's just I feel like the question also is Web3 a product or a feature? Because if you look, for instance, I'm just taking an example of social audio, but with Clubhouse during COVID, people thought that social audio will be a product when actually it's working way better on a platform like Twitter, where it's kind of a feature. So is, for instance, tomorrow Twitter gonna, let's imagine, because I think they're the one who are the most likely to do something like that. Let's say if they decide to be partly decentralized, and if you actually look at the originally the first version of Twitter, the idea was to be totally decentralized. So let's imagine that you can earn tokens, etc. Maybe sell NFTs directly in there. Potentially that's what's cool and really bring mass adoption. I don't think necessarily a platform like Meta. I think it's funny because they have the name Meta, but I feel like they are so much, they care about the platform so much that they wouldn't, let it loose to their users. Yeah, that's kind of the question that the next few years gonna have to answer.
And I think, I mean, unfortunately, we're running out of time, so it's not a conversation we can dig into just yet. But I think that's actually a very critical point, because when we speak of this Web 2 versus Web 3 world, we're almost framing it as a total replacement of one another. And rather than recognizing that they don't actually have to be mutually exclusive from each other. They can actually blend into, you know, that beautiful middle part of a Venn diagram, and seeing how that's going to unfold in the next few months to the next half decade is going to be really interesting. I mean, all three of you, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have just run out of time, but this was a brilliant conversation. Best of luck with the integration of blockchain technology into Snipfeed and Disco and Livepeer. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.